Hello, and welcome to Lyla's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla as she explores the exotic island of Zanzibar, in Tanzania. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Lyla woke to the sound of waves rolling gently onto the shore, and the distant call of a rooster somewhere beyond her hotel window. The room was filled with soft morning light, filtered through white curtains that moved lazily in the breeze. She lay still for a moment, listening to the peaceful rhythm of the ocean, then rose and opened the curtains wider. Her hotel room looked out over a stretch of pale sand and turquoise water that seemed almost impossibly blue. A few palm trees leaned at angles along the beach, their fronds rustling in the wind. The air that drifted in through the window was warm and slightly humid, carrying with it the smell of salt and something sweet, perhaps frangipani or jasmine from the garden below. Lyla showered and dressed in light cotton clothes, choosing a loose linen shirt and comfortable trousers suitable for a day of exploring. She'd signed up for a small group tour that would take her to Stone Town and some of the island's other attractions, and she was looking forward to seeing Zanzibar through the eyes of a local guide. Downstairs, the hotel's breakfast area was open to the air, with tables arranged under a thatched roof. Lyla helped herself to fresh papaya and pineapple, a warm chapati with honey, and a cup of strong spiced tea. As she ate, she watched a pair of bright yellow weaver birds building a nest in a nearby tree, their movements quick and purposeful. At precisely 8 o'clock, a minibus pulled up to the hotel entrance. Lyla gathered her small backpack, sunscreen, water bottle, hat, and camera, and made her way outside. A man in a crisp blue shirt stood beside the bus, holding a clipboard. "Good morning. Are you Lyla?" he asked, his smile warm and welcoming. "Yes, that's me." "Excellent. I'm Hassan, your guide for today. Please, come aboard. We have a few more people to collect, then we'll be on our way." Lyla climbed into the minibus and chose a seat near the window. Already inside were 3 other passengers, a couple who looked to be in their 60s, speaking quietly to each other in what sounded like German, and a young woman with a thick braid of dark hair who gave Lyla a friendly smile. "Good morning," the young woman said. "I'm Amara from Vancouver." "Lyla, nice to meet you." The older couple turned and introduced themselves as well. "Klaus and Ingrid," the man said with a warm smile and a slight German accent. "We're from Munich. This is our first time in East Africa." Hassan drove to 2 more hotels, collecting a family of 4 at the first stop. The parents introduced themselves as David and Sarah from Brisbane, and their 2 teenage daughters, Emma and Sophie, offered cheerful hellos before immediately resuming a conversation about whether they'd see dolphins. At the final hotel, a solo traveler climbed aboard, a man perhaps in his 40s with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. "Buongiorno," he said, settling into a seat. "I'm Marco, from Bologna. Well, originally from Bologna. Now I live in about 6 different countries depending on the month," he grinned. "I'm a terrible person to ask. Where are you from?" "That sounds like a good problem to have," David said. "Now we are complete," Hassan announced cheerfully as he pulled back onto the road. "Welcome everyone. to what I hope will be a wonderful day. It's lovely to have such an international group. Germany, Canada, Australia, Italy, and Lyla, where do you call home? I suppose I'm a bit like Marco, Lyla said with a smile. It depends on the day, but I grew up in England. Wonderful! So we have the whole world in this little bus. We have much to see today. First, we go to Stone Town, the historic heart of Zanzibar city. Then a spice farm for lunch, and this afternoon, a boat trip to Prison Island. But first, let me tell you a little bit about where we are. As Hassan spoke, describing the history of Zanzibar as a trading port, and the blend of African, Arab, Indian and European influences that had shaped the island, Lyla gazed out the window. They passed small villages where children played in dusty yards, their laughter floating through the air. Women in brightly colored kangas walked along the roadside, some carrying bundles on their heads with effortless grace. Goats grazed on patches of scrubby grass, and every so often, a bicycle would overtake them, loaded improbably high with bananas or firewood. The road was lined with palm trees and strange-looking baobabs, their thick trunks and spindly branches giving them an almost upside-down appearance. Hassan pointed one out. We call this the tree of life. The baobab can live for thousands of years and stores water in its trunk, very useful in the dry season. Sophie, who couldn't have been more than 16, leaned forward. Do people actually climb inside them? Hassan laughed. Some baobabs are so large. Yes, people have used them as shelters, even as small shops or bars. Not these ones, though. These are youngsters, only 300 or 400 years old. Sophie's eyes widened, and Lyla found herself smiling at the idea of a 400-year-old tree being considered a youngster. After about 40 minutes, the landscape began to change. Buildings appeared more frequently, and soon they were entering the outskirts of Stone Town. The streets narrowed, and the architecture shifted to something more dense and historic. Tall buildings with ornate wooden doors, carved balconies, and crumbling coral stone walls. Hassan parked near the old fort, and the group disembarked. The heat hit Lyla immediately, more intense here than at the breezy coastline. But it wasn't unpleasant, just warm and enveloping, like stepping into a gentle sauna. The old fort stood solid and imposing, its thick walls built from coral stone that had aged to a soft, honey color. Hassan led them inside, where an open courtyard was ringed by arched walkways. This fort was built by the Omanis in the 17th century to defend against the Portuguese, he explained. Now it is used for cultural events, sometimes concerts, sometimes theater. A much better purpose, I think. The group wandered through the fort, some taking photographs, while others simply stood in the shade, taking in the atmosphere. Lyla ran her hand along one of the walls, feeling the rough texture of the coral stone, pitted and weathered by centuries of sun and salt air. From the fort, they walked a short distance to the House of Wonders, a grand building that dominated the waterfront. Its facade was elegant, with tall columns and multiple balconies, and it was topped with a clock tower that Hassan informed them was the tallest building in Stone Town when it was built. It was called the House of Wonders because it was the first building in Zanzibar to have electricity, and it also had an elevator, Hassan said. The Sultan used it as a ceremonial palace. These days it is supposed to be a museum, but I'm afraid it's closed for renovations. Still, beautiful from the outside, yes? The group agreed that it was indeed beautiful. and they spent several minutes admiring the building and the view of the harbor beyond, where dhows with their distinctive triangular sails bobbed on the water. They continued walking through the narrow streets of Stone Town, past shops selling spices and fabrics, past old mosques with simple minarets, and past houses with those famous carved doors, each one different, some painted in bright colors, others left natural, all of them intricately decorated with brass studs and elaborate designs. "Now," Hassan said, "we come to a place some of you may be particularly interested in. This is the house where Freddie Mercury was born." Lyla felt a small thrill of excitement. She'd forgotten that the Queen frontman was from here, one of the greatest rock voices of all time, no doubt. The house itself was narrow and painted bright yellow, with a small sign outside and a few photographs displayed in the windows. It had been converted into a small museum and cafe. The group went inside, where the walls were covered with photographs of Freddie Mercury throughout his life. Images from his childhood, pictures of Queen in concert, album covers, and handwritten lyrics. Lyla moved slowly from photograph to photograph, reading the captions. There he was as a little boy in Zanzibar, before his family moved to India. There he was as a young man in London, already showing hints of the performer he would become. She lingered in front of a photograph of him on stage, mid-performance, his arms outstretched, his presence absolutely electric even in a still image. Marco, the Italian traveler, came to stand beside her. "Incredible performer," he said softly. "I saw Queen once, in Milan many years ago. I was very young. I will never forget it." "I wish I'd had the chance," Lyla said. "It must have been an electrifying experience." "Yes, I still remember the feeling." After everyone had finished exploring the museum, Hassan led them to a small cafe nearby where cold drinks were waiting. Lyla ordered a passion fruit juice, which arrived in a tall glass, bright orange, and perfectly chilled. She sipped it slowly, savoring the sweet tart flavor, while the group rested in the shade of an awning. The German couple were looking at a map, discussing quietly whether they should come back to Stone Town on their own another day to explore more thoroughly. One of the Australian daughters was showing her sister something on her phone, both of them laughing. The parents sat contentedly, watching the street life pass by. After their break, the group made their way to Forodani Gardens, a waterfront park, lined with palm trees and patches of well-maintained grass. At this time of day, the gardens were relatively quiet, but Hassan explained that in the evening, they transformed into a bustling night market. "This is where everyone comes after sunset," he said. "Food vendors set up all along here, grilled seafood, Zanzibar pizza, sugarcane juice, Urojo soup. The smell is incredible. If you have time this evening after we return, you should come back and try some." They walked through the gardens, and Lyla noticed a few locals sitting on benches in the shade, chatting or reading newspapers. Children played near a small monument, their high-pitched voices carrying across the grass. Beyond the gardens, the Indian Ocean stretched out calm and glittering under the midday sun. "Now," Hassan said, checking his watch, "we should head to our next destination. Time for lunch and a spice farm tour." They returned to the minibus and drove out of Stone Town, back into the countryside. The landscape here was lush and green, with small farms tucked between groves of trees. After 20 minutes or so, Hassan turned onto a narrow dirt road that led to a plantation. They were greeted by a man named Salim, who would be their guide for the spice tour. He was lean and energetic, with a quick smile and hands that gestured constantly as he spoke. "Welcome, welcome. Come, I will show you why Zanzibar is called the Spice Island." The group followed him into a garden that seemed to burst with life. Plants of every size and shape grew in organized chaos, their leaves glossy green in the sunlight. Salim stopped at various plants, explaining each one with obvious enthusiasm. "This is vanilla," he said, pointing to a vine climbing up a tree trunk. "You see these flowers? Each one must be pollinated by hand, very carefully, and then the pods take many months to develop." He picked a dried vanilla pod from a basket and passed it around. Lyla held it to her nose, breathing in the sweet, familiar scent. They moved on to cardamom plants, clove trees, cinnamon bark that Salim peeled back to show them the fragrant inner layers, and turmeric roots that stained his fingers bright yellow when he broke them open. He plucked leaves for them to smell: lemongrass, curry leaf, pandan, and crushed black peppercorns in his palm, holding them out so the group could inhale the sharp, spicy aroma. "And this," Salim said with a grin, "is lipstick tree." He picked a spiky red pod and cracked it open to reveal seeds coated in a waxy red substance. He dabbed a bit on his fingers and drew a stripe across Emma's cheek. She giggled, and soon everyone was decorated with natural red face paint, laughing as they admired each other's tribal markings. Lyla found the whole experience delightful. The smells, the colors, the tactile nature of touching and tasting, it engaged all her senses. Salim showed them nutmeg, explaining how the same fruit produced both nutmeg and mace, and he climbed a coconut palm with astonishing agility to knock down fresh coconuts, which he opened with a machete and passed around so they could drink the sweet water inside. After the tour, lunch was served at a long table under the shade of a large mango tree. The meal was simple but delicious. Fragrant pilau rice cooked with spices, grilled fish with a tangy tamarind sauce, coconut beans, fresh chapati, and a salad of tomatoes and onions. For dessert, there were slices of sweet pineapple and banana, and tiny cups of thick cardamom-scented coffee. The group ate contentedly, the conversation flowing easily now that they'd spent the morning together. Klaus and Ingrid talked about a trip they'd taken to India many years ago, comparing the spices they'd seen there with these. David and Sarah shared stories of their farm back home, where they grew macadamias. Marco described the markets in Italy, where his mother used to buy fresh herbs and vegetables every morning. Lyla listened more than she spoke, enjoying the different accents and perspectives, the way travel brought together people who would never otherwise have met. The young woman with the braid, whose name was Amara, and who was from Canada, caught Lila's eye and smiled. "This is nice, isn't it? Just sitting here taking our time." "It really is," Lyla agreed. After lunch, Hassan gathered everyone back into the minibus. "Now for the part one think you'll all enjoy very much. We're going to Prison Island." They drove back towards Stone Town, and then to a dock where several boats were moored. Hassan spoke with the captain, and soon the group was climbing aboard a traditional wooden dhow with a small motor. Life jackets were distributed, and with a gentle rumble they set off across the water. The sea was remarkably calm, its surface smooth and gleaming. Lyla sat near the edge of the boat, one hand trailing in the water, watching Stone Town recede behind them. The city looked beautiful from this distance, its white and cream buildings clustered together, the House of Wonders rising above them, all of it shimmering slightly in the heat. The boat ride took about 20 minutes. The water changed color as they moved farther from shore, deepening from pale turquoise to darker shades of blue and green. Flying fish occasionally skittered across the surface, their fins catching the light. The captain pointed them out, clearly pleased when the passengers exclaimed in delight. Prison Island came into view, a small island covered with scrubby vegetation and ringed with a pale beach. As they approached, Hassan explained its history. The island was originally used as a prison for rebellious slaves, and later the British built a prison here for criminals, though it was never actually used for that purpose. Instead, it became a quarantine station for yellow fever. Now it's a sanctuary for giant tortoises. They disembarked onto a small wooden pier and walked up a path to an enclosed area where several enormous tortoises moved about slowly or simply sat basking in patches of sunlight. Some of them were truly huge, their shells weathered and ancient-looking. These tortoises were a gift from the British governor of Seychelles in the late 1800s, Hassan said. Some of them are over 100 years old. You can feed them if you like. We have some leaves here. The group approached cautiously, then with growing confidence as they realized how gentle and slow-moving the creatures were. Lyla knelt down beside one particularly large tortoise and offered it a leaf. The tortoise extended its wrinkled neck, took the leaf delicately in its mouth, and chewed with what seemed like great contentment. Its eyes were dark and ancient, and Lyla felt a strange sense of connection to this creature that had been alive for so much longer than she had, that had witnessed so much more. Emma was giggling as a tortoise nibbled lettuce from her hand. "It tickles," she said, delighted. After spending time with the tortoises and exploring the old quarantine buildings, now partially in ruins, their coral stone walls crumbling romantically among the trees, Hassan led them back to the beach. "Now if you like, you can swim or snorkel. The water here is beautiful, and there are many fish." Several members of the group had brought swimwear, and they changed in a small facility near the beach. Lyla had worn her suit under her clothes, so she simply stripped down and waded into the water. It was perfectly warm, like bath water, and so clear she could see every pebble and shell on the sandy bottom. Hassan distributed snorkeling masks, and Lyla fitted hers on, adjusted the strap, and pushed off into deeper water. She floated face down, breathing steadily through the snorkel, and watched the underwater world reveal itself. Small bright fish darted around coral formations, yellow ones with black stripes, blue ones with iridescent scales, tiny silver fish that moved in synchronized schools. The coral itself was beautiful, branching and textured, providing homes and hiding places for countless creatures. Lyla spotted a sea urchin tucked into a crevice, its spines waving gently, and a starfish clinging to a rock. She swam slowly, not chasing anything, just observing. The water muffled all sound except for her own breathing, the rhythmic in and out through the snorkel tube, and created a sense of peaceful isolation. She felt weightless, suspended in this blue world, part of it, but also separate, a visitor passing through. Time seemed to dissolve. She didn't know if she'd been snorkeling for 10 minutes or 40. Eventually she became aware that her fingers were starting to prune, and she swam back toward shore, standing up in the shallows and pulling off her mask. Marco was sitting on the beach, having finished his swim earlier. "Beautiful, yes?" he called to her. Incredible, Lyla said, squeezing water from her hair. The others gradually emerged from the sea, everyone sun-warmed and pleasantly tired. They dried off and gathered their things, and Hassan led them back to the boat. The journey back to Stone Town was quiet, the group content to sit in companionable silence, watching the water and the sky and the approaching shore. By the time they docked, the afternoon was fading into early evening. The light had turned golden, softening everything it touched. Hassan gathered the group together. "We have one more thing on our agenda. Dinner. I'm taking you to a rooftop restaurant with a wonderful view. I think you'll enjoy it." They walked back into Stone Town's maze of narrow streets, which were busier now as people finished their workday and began their evening routines. Shopkeepers stood in doorways, chatting with neighbors. The smell of grilling meat and spices drifted from unseen kitchens. Someone was playing music, the rhythmic beat of taarab, Zanzibar's traditional music, with its blend of Arabic and African sounds. The restaurant was reached via a narrow staircase that opened onto a spacious rooftop terrace. Tables were arranged under strings of lights, and the view stretched out over the rooftops of Stone Town to the harbor beyond. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The group settled at a long table, and soon platters of food began to arrive. There was grilled octopus, tender and slightly charred, coconut-crusted prawns, biryani rice studded with raisins and cashews, grilled kingfish with a spicy pili-pili sauce, fresh naan bread still warm from the oven, bowls of mchicha, a spinach-like vegetable cooked with coconut milk, and for those who wanted it, urojo, the tangy Zanzibar soup filled with cassava chips, boiled eggs and spices. Lyla tried a bit of everything, savoring the complex flavors, the heat of the chilies, the sweetness of the coconut, the freshness of the seafood. Conversations flowed around the table, relaxed and meandering. Klaus and Ingrid talked about the tortoises, marveling at their age. The Australian family planned what they wanted to see during the rest of their trip. Amara and Lyla discovered they'd both been to Morocco and compared notes on their favorite cities. As they ate, the sky deepened from orange to purple to a soft, dark blue. The first stars appeared, and lights began to twinkle across the city below. Hassan ordered a pot of Zanzibari tea for the table, sweet and spiced with cinnamon, cardamom and ginger, and they sipped it slowly, letting dinner settle. "Thank you all for a wonderful day," Hassan said, raising his small teacup in a toast. "I hope you've enjoyed seeing my island." "It's been perfect," Ingrid said warmly, and the others murmured their agreement. Lyla looked around the table at these people who'd been strangers this morning and now felt like travel companions, united by shared experiences. She thought about the day, the textures of Stone Town, the face paint at the spice farm, the ancient eyes of the tortoises, the silent beauty of the underwater world. Each moment had been distinct, yet they'd flowed together seamlessly, creating a day that felt both full and unhurried. After dinner, Hassan arranged for the minibus to take everyone back to their hotels. As they wound through the dark roads past villages where cooking fires glowed and voices drifted through the warm night air, Lyla rested her head against the window and let her eyes close for a moment. When they reached her hotel, she thanked Hassan and said goodnight to the others. "Safe travels, everyone. Maybe we'll meet again somewhere in the world." "You never know," Marco said with a smile. "The world is smaller than we think." Lyla walked into the hotel and up to her room. She opened the window to let in the night air and stood there for a while, listening to the waves. The sound was soothing, eternal, the same sound that had been washing up on this shore for millennia. She thought about the tortoises again, those patient, ancient creatures. They'd been on that island for over a century, watching the tides come and go, watching the seasons change, unbothered by the passage of time. There was something comforting in that, a reminder that while her own life moved quickly, filled with plans and travels and constant motion, the natural world maintained its own slower rhythm. Lyla changed into comfortable clothes and sat by the window with a glass of water, content to simply be still. The day had given her so much: beauty, connection, new experiences, and now it was enough to sit and let it all settle, to feel grateful for the gift of this place and this time. The moon was rising over the ocean, casting a silver path across the water. Somewhere in the distance she could hear the faint sound of music, probably from one of the beach bars further down the coast. But here, in her room, there was only peace. She thought about tomorrow, whatever it might bring, but not with any urgency. There was time for everything. Time to explore more of the island. Time to rest. Time to watch the sunset. Time to breathe in the spice-scented air and swim in the clear water. Time to simply exist in this beautiful place where the pace of life seemed to match the gentle rhythm of the waves. Lyla finished her water and settled into a large armchair, leaving the window open so she could still hear the ocean. The sound wrapped around her like a blanket, and she felt her body relax, her mind quiet and full of blue water and golden light, and the memory of a tortoise's ancient knowing eyes.